Cool. So, hey everybody, it's um, it's an odd numbered week, right? I've been out off for 2 weeks, so I don't know
Welcome
what
back.
y'all are doing. Thanks. But I think what we're doing, we're demoing, and then we're going to do. Radhika's going to leave a learning module on accessibility, and then we'll make some plans for next week. So, um, yeah, who wants to demo?
We weren't able to get it finished, but I could demo what we have so far.
Cool.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Sure. 1 second. Let me get it up. So I'll share my screen first. All right. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So our issue this week was to estimate the next purchase date, and so as part of that, we had the script that was provided, and so we pretty much started trying to get the pieces needed, the parameters. I always mix them up. The arguments, I think, needed to go into the parameters, and so we're able to get 2 of those first 3. And so we're still working on getting the last one. But at the moment, what we have, I'll start with the code, actually. I think that'll be best. All right. So we needed the parameters we needed. Here's the script that was provided. We needed the number of purchases, the latest interval, and then the last estimate. So far we've been able to get the number of purchases and the latest interval. And so what we've did is we created a new state. And so when you add your item, it starts with 0, number of purchases at 0. And then when you check it, so over here, oh man, what was the one I just created? There it is. So when you check, let's say eggs, it's going to create a new, or it's going to update the number of purchases to 1. And then, sorry, I lost track a little bit. And then it's going to update the date purchased here. So we have those 2 additional things that we changed. And for testing purposes, we set it to 5 seconds. And so I can show you avocados I've kind of been playing with. And so every time you click avocados, it updates the number of purchases by 1. And then it determines the latest interval. This is currently in seconds, but this would ultimately be in days. So it'd say how many days between the last time you purchased it. And so if I go back to it and click it again, you'll see that it's only been 17 seconds since the last time. But again, that would be changed to days. And so we kind of have the math for changing that back to days here that I've commented out. But I'll revert back to that after this. And so that's kind of where we're at. So we have it determining, again, your interval and your number of purchases. And we now need to do the estimation basically so that it kind of is able to gather based on this script here. It's able to estimate the interval coming up. And so that's kind of our next step. We both had very exhausting personal professional weeks, and we were just struggling to kind of get together as a result of that. But yeah, so we're almost there, I think, hopefully. Any questions or?
Well, do you have a sense of how much more there is to do, or like I guess it kind of matters, like whether we take on another full kind of issue this coming week, or whether we, if you think it's going to be like 3 days, then there may not be time to kind of get another additional one done. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not 100%. I think at this point it's just trying to implement, because I think we could be wrong. We really kind of, with the limited time that we did have, kind of struggled to get too much further. That script itself was just a little confusing for us. And so I think the latest interval, like the last parameter we need, is something that is part of a calculation overall. And so it's trying to at least get that last parameter kind of figured out. And then once we have that, I think it's just a matter of importing that script and just plugging them all in. Yeah, it might be, I'm not sure, maybe Jayla has an opinion, but it might be like another hour or two until we're able to get it fully resolved.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be like a 3-day task. The reason why we kind of stopped today is because we were going really hard for like 2+ hours, and it just became kind of like us staring at the screen.
Yeah, we worked on this morning just so we had something to show you.
Yeah. So just an hour, maybe another hour or 2 hours at most, but I think that we were almost there and we were making great progress during our first call. So.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I mean, it looks like you're most of the way there. So, so that's cool. I mean, if you think you all can get it done like by tomorrow or tomorrow end of day even, there's probably still time to move on to the next issue. So, does that sound all right, Michael and Radhika, as a plan?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think ultimately it's up to them to like decide if it's enough, or like they want to bite off another piece before this one is, you're done chewing this one, I guess. Terrible analogy, but
because I mean, you're going to switch pairs, so whether you can kind of keep the next pairings unblocked while you finish this one up is maybe the kind of thing, like you might be juggling two things for a day or so.
Yeah, I think just keep us updated if it's too much. Otherwise, we're going to go with your assumption that it's not going to be a lot.
Okay.
I think, do you two think that you can, if you sit down and have one really awesome session, you can like finish it? Does it feel like that, or does it feel like there's a lot more than that?
No, just the last session. We were caught on kind of our calculations for a little bit. That's what kind of slowed us up. But I think that we have a better understanding of what the problem is and how to get there than we did when we started. And that was a big thing too, is that we couldn't figure out what they were asking at first. With that equation, that estimates equation was really confusing at first.
Yeah. So my recommendation would be to proceed through the beginning of this week with your new pair, and then we should schedule something on the calendar today. Schedule something on the calendar for next week, like right after this call, and you can invite Radhika or I to that, and we'll just like have like a trio session where we finish up and like push it through the finish line. I think usually those are like, I think if we get off the call and say, okay, we'll finish it, and it might linger, but if we like schedule some time for us to all work together, we'll push it through together.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
And
yeah,
I'll
we
be happy.
Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say I'd be happy to join you. I did that with another pair previously. We just kind of like nerded out and wrote some code, and we ended up getting most of it done. So
yeah, we had wanted to do that this week, and then we just couldn't even get to a point where it was worth bringing you on just yet. But I think now we're at that point. So
all right,
cool. Haley and Rachel, you want to show us what you got?
Yeah. Haley, did you want to go, or do you want me to go? I can go if you don't want to.
Yeah, if you don't mind going, because I know I think you took most of the last bit, which probably will be the most of the discussion.
And we got questions about that bit too, so.
Yeah, I'm like, I knew that was going to come up.
Yep. Okay, so our issue is we want to delete an item and make sure that a user is warned before the delete goes through so they can cancel if they want. So let's just see what that looks like. And Matthew, we just use your list all the time because it's so easy to remember. So this little X will show up, and that's your little delete. You click that and a little modal will pop up, and you can cancel the modal will close and it'll still be there, but you can hit OK and then it'll go away and it'll be gone. It's gone. And the way we did that, so we started out, let's see, where is it? Where did we start? We started with this handle delete function, which is just like the update function, really. So just this piece right here. It just points at the doc, grabs its ID, and just runs through the delete like the update does. But because we wanted to have a confirmation, we needed to handle it asynchronously. So this is an asynchronous function that's going to wait for a promise to resolve in the show function. One thing that was interesting about figuring this out was I didn't know about this e.persist, and there was an error in the console that said, "Hey, you need the persist function, and here's a link to how to use it." And it was the most useful error I've ever gotten in my life. Anyways, so that was cool, and I put a link in the Slack if anybody was interested in that. But so also, I mean, I had another tutorial about handling a modal asynchronously, and that's kind of where this comes from. So we initialize this resolve variable at the top here, and then when we're handling cancel or handling confirm, we're passing in booleans to set the modal to be open, or rather closed when you hit either of these buttons. But we're going to be passing these booleans to resolve to true or false for the promise to return true or false, depending on the user's input. And the other thing that we added, that modal is just a styled component. All it does is contain the children that it wraps around so that they can pop out using the CSS and a cute little animation that I had from a previous project where I did a bunch of research on how to do modal CSS, and so that's where this came from. It's from an earlier project. And so yeah, so our big question about this is that I don't know if I explained this very well, because that was kind of like the best understanding that we came up with, and we both kind of felt unsure about how this really is working when this variable is receiving these booleans and then being set equal to this resolution in the promise. Like, does that make sense when I say that? Like, because I feel like we couldn't quite wrap our minds around that.
You know, I always find raw promises a little confusing. Just the way the API works. So, I feel like I'm pretty much following it, but
okay, because that's how I feel like I'm kind of following it.
I didn't understand it until I checked the branch out and ran the code on my own machine. Then it made sense to me.
Okay.
But I think on first glance, I was not sure why you were using promises. So that's why I checked it out to take a look at that.
Okay.
Because you also had a note, Michael, about having an asynchronous call instead of asynchronous.
Yeah, so my first gut reaction to the promise usage was that this is not an asynchronous thing. Even though the page underneath is waiting on the response from the modal, it's all contained within the app. Usually asynchronous work for me is I'm waiting on something else to finish, like an API response, and that's something out of the boundary of the app, out of my control. But this is still inside of your app. I think if you would have written the modal in a way that you could pass a callback to it, so when you press confirm, okay, you call function, and then when you press cancel, you call another different callback, then you can gut the whole promise logic in there and just like pass callbacks around.
Does that make sense? Yeah, it could be a little simpler just using the built-in confirm dialogue. This is prettier, so
yeah,
it is cool.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was impressed with the animation, like little animations like that. It's just a few lines of code, but they go a long way in terms of like the user experience. And also like, I just think animations are nice. So
They are
I like
nice,
that.
especially when you realize like how easy it really is, because it's
Yeah.
literally just this. That's all there is to it.
I always feel like a Pixar animator whenever I do something simple with
Yeah.
animation.
It's fun. Okay, so yeah, that's really all there is. I felt like this was pretty good. We both thought this was a pretty good solution because it also keeps the state. We only added 2 bits of state, so it keeps that pretty minimal. This is really all we need, but we really wanted to see the item name in the confirmation, so it was clear what you were deleting. So that's why this state is here, so that the first thing that happens when this runs is it just sets the target value to state, so you just have it when you need it.
Yeah, that's actually a nice UX touch. What does the persist thing do? What does that do?
Okay, so because this is an asynchronous function, the event does not persist. It doesn't hang out. And I kept getting this undefined. And then finally I looked in the console and it was like, well, this isn't, your event's not persisting. So you really just need to use this function that you can find here in the React documents. So it just makes sure that the event hangs around while we're awaiting for a resolution to the promise.
Oh, okay, is that part of the synthetic events thing that you posted?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
exactly.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't remember that being a built-in thing.
So that is another thing that I think you could get rid of if you, so this handle delete function is the function you call when you press the X button, right?
Yeah.
So I think this function, all you could do when you press the X button, all you have to do is do a set is open, the function, to true. And if that variable is set to true, then show the modal, and I think you already have that logic. And then the function that the delete confirmation, the handle confirm, that can do it would still be an asynchronous function, but it wouldn't have to like await show. I think show doesn't need to be asynchronous function because all you're doing is turning a Boolean to true and re-rendering the component. And then from there, you can handle the confirmation or cancel, and then you wouldn't have to do any type of promises. But I think because you did the logic inside of the handle delete, then that's why you needed to like create the promise to be able to like handle, especially the creating the let resolve at the top of the file. You could get rid of that too. So.
Okay. I'm not sure.
We can get on a call later, or I can give you like a code sample to help guide you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
We tried to do like a show modal. It might have just been part of the modal part because it was calling itself multiple times.
Yeah, because initially we were trying to put it in a place where we could pass information in, which is in the map function. Actually having the modal itself within the map function causes it to render as many times as it's rendering items. So if there's 3 items, there's 3 modals. So we needed a way to be able to pass the event and grab the item name or whatever information we needed to pass without actually rendering the modal in that spot. So that was kind of what started us down this route.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that name that you're going to delete, it's different for each item. So I see why you were thinking about putting the modal in the map function. I think that what you could do is pass that name in as a prop to the like confirmation modal, and then you'd have it there.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to get it somehow. We would just have to play around with the code a bit, but I think we could do it without promises there and not have to render it in the map function either.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a clever solution, and it works.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry, I don't mean to. I'm like poo-pooing it, but yeah.
Well, but also like we were starting to go there too, because we were trying to figure out a way to not have to do it asynchronously because we weren't comfortable with that. We weren't sure how to figure that out, and we just kind of did. so we went ahead with it.
Yeah, actually, so I posted just some pseudocode in the chat, like just using the built-in confirm. But the problem with that, I guess, if like there would be like if you were like say you had two people using the same list and someone else was doing something to the item at the same time, like a confirm was going to just block JavaScript execution until it gets an answer. So whereas your modal would actually, like somebody else could keep interacting with it, and you could have the app kind of updating in the background. You'd have the UI would be free to kind of keep working while you're making the decision whether to okay or cancel out. But yeah, it's interesting. There's only so many ways to do things. Cool. All right. Anything else about those? Any other questions about the demos or anything? Looks like good progress this week. Radhika, you want to take over and run us through some accessibility stuff?
All right, let's share. Hopefully this shares my entire screen and not just. All right, are we?
I think so. I see your menus. So yeah.
Am I presenting properly?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about accessibility this week. This is a topic that I think has come into much more importance in the past few years than it used to. For like a personal example, last quarter, so we actually had an accessibility lawsuit, which you hear about a lot and which people get really angry about a lot. Like if you hear web developers talking about accessibility online, they'll say like it's like draconic that people can sue for accessibility, but we're not going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about like part of that lawsuit, whether or not there should have been a lawsuit. The point is the stuff we were working on was not accessible for a long time. And so we had a major overhaul across the company where like everyone had to work on accessibility to like get our pages up to spec. And the best way to make sure you don't get a lawsuit is to just make it accessible in the first place. So that's what we're going to talk about now. All right, so accessibility is often shortened to A11Y. Some people say ally for that. It's up to you, but it's just because there's 11 letters in between the A and the Y in accessibility. You see the same thing with stuff like on the next slide, we'll see W3C, which is World Wide Web Consortium. There's just so many acronyms. But if you ever see A11Y, it's not like a specific specification or anything. It's just talking about accessibility in general. So accessibility is the inclusive, oh no, I have my covering up part of the screen, is the inclusive practice of ensuring that there are no barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally all users have equal access to information and functionality. W3C, which is again World Wide Web Consortium, maintains a working group dedicated to web accessibility and publishes related standards. And the section 508 here is the lawsuit stuff I was talking about. So I want to focus in on three parts of this. People with physical disabilities, this is what you generally hear about when you hear about accessibility. These are people who are like blind or have motor impairments, so they can only use like a keyboard, or they can only use like a screen reader or a magnifier. You hear about that kind of stuff a lot. But there's also situational disabilities. Recently, a lot of disability advocates have been saying stuff like accessibility is for everyone, and that's partially true. I would say that there's definitely a difference between them. But like if you break your arm and you have to go to work tomorrow, and like you have to use like let's say the React website to read the docs, the React website should and like legally now has to be accessible to you even though all you did was break your arm. And then the socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed are that your website has to be fast. Obviously, everybody's trying to do that anyway. But yeah, it's worth noting that accessible websites are not just about like the kind of more stereotypical stuff with screen readers. It's like breaking your arm, breaking a finger even. Like if your website requires all 10 fingers to operate, that's not accessible. Stuff like that. Anyway. So some people with disabilities access websites using assistive technologies, like I said, magnifiers, screen readers, speech input, assistive keyboards, braille displays. Popular screen readers include NVDA. This one is free and on Windows. JAWS is super expensive and paid on Windows. VoiceOver obviously is free on Mac. I made this note here, which is that accessibility isn't only for people who use assistive technologies. Accessibility can be targeting people who have a temporarily broken arm, color blindness, or just less than 20/20 vision. So like I think about the fact that, do you ever see websites that are just super designery and that have gray text on gray text? Like even though you can go through it with a screen reader, or not gray text on gray text on a gray background, that's like very thin font, dark gray on a light gray background. So that, even though you can go through it with a screen reader or a magnifier, that's not considered to be accessible because it's not accessible to people with less than 20/20 vision, people who don't have like the $3,000 Mac displays, or someone with color blindness. So websites need to be accessible to everyone. It's not just about screen readers. And I think there's a big misconception with accessibility, that people think it's really just about screen readers. Why? So it's the right thing to do to provide equitable access to information. You are legally obligated, especially if you like in corporate companies, if you're working on a user-facing page that, like in the case of my work, is like millions of people each month, like you will get a lawsuit and you don't want to be responsible for that. More people in the US access websites with assistive technology than live in Canada. Some estimate that 20% of website visitors have some sort of disability. So again, a lot of people often say accessibility is an edge case, or that, it's only 1% of your audience, but you don't really know that. It might be 1% of your audience that's using a screen reader, but it could be way more that just like have a color blindness or a motor impairment, or like just, again, a broken arm. So making your pages more accessible for people with disabilities makes them more accessible for everyone, including all of us here, whether we are disabled or not. The more accessible websites are, the better it is for everyone. It's kind of, so there's like a real life example of accessibility, which is, how on the sidewalks, they have the slopes. They've done studies on this. First, they added slopes because of the ADA, the accessibility. What is the ADA? Someone knows, right? What does the ADA stand for?
It's Americans with Disabilities Act.
There we go. So they added the sloped end of the sidewalks for people with wheelchairs, and they did a study on people who are walking normally, and people will walk like further just to get to the slope because it's a more pleasant experience to walk down a slope than doing the big step from the sidewalk to the road. And like that's true for websites as well. Accessibility helps everyone. All right, so sometimes, what am I trying to say? It is important to think about all different kinds of accessibilities, and personas exist to help deal with that, which is, again, can go from broken arm all the way up to blindness as far as situations go. So we have permanent disabilities, which is, again, the kind of the more stereotypical thing that we think about when we think about accessibility. There's temporary, broken arm, ear infection, but then there's also situational, which is just situational applies to 100% of your audience, and situational will come up time and time again. And situational is the kind of thing, like if you think about situational disabilities, that is the kind of thing that makes your website accessible to absolutely everyone. Thinking about extremes is good, but I think it's a little myopic, and I think a lot of people make mistakes by doing that. All right, so how do we make our websites accessible? Use semantic HTML, don't use divs for everything. Sections, forgot the other ones now, but sections are good. Always use alt attributes on your image tags. Use ARIA attributes if necessary and if relevant. Don't add ARIA tags to places where it isn't needed, but make sure to check the MDN and whatever else you use to check these things to make sure it's in the right place. Ensure all content is reachable by a keyboard, and we'll look at that in a second. Ensure content and tab ordering makes sense so that when someone is going through with the keyboard or with this or with like voiceover, that it's going in an order that makes sense when you're listening to it or when you're tabbing through it. Use sufficient color contrast, which is what I was saying about gray text on a gray background. Don't use only color to signify state. We will also go over that in a second with an example. And run through the experience yourself and do what you think is right. So I think, you know, tools are great. There's a lot of automated tools that tells you what's wrong with accessibility. But sometimes when we're working with really complicated things, just running through the experience yourself and QAing it yourself is the best way to figure out what the user experience is going to be like on the other end. Because often it's not as simple as just using semantic HTML and adding the ARIA attributes. It could end up being, you know, a very bad experience for disabled users, and you don't really know until you try out your website. All right, so how do we figure out what accessibility problems there are? So there are automated tools such as Axe. Like I said, it doesn't really find everything. Guided audits, such as what's built into accessibility insights, is really good because it'll tell you to manually go through things and tell you what to check. And especially at the beginning, when you're not really used to figuring out what needs to be done accessibly, it's really good to have that kind of like guidance of telling you the possibilities of what could go wrong in your website. There are also companies that do this, and there's a lot of companies will outsource their accessibility audits to someone else who's an expert in it, and they'll come back and have all of these suggestions. So like we did that when we had our lawsuit. We had to keep going back and forth with our accessibility audit company, and they kept checking our work, seeing if it's accessible enough. And then we also did a lot of self-testing using free or paid for by the company screen readers, keyboard tabbing tools, color contrast Chrome extensions. There's some that are like made to show you what a color, different kinds of vision will look like. What am I trying? Like, say if you have cataracts versus if you have color blindness, there's like really nice Chrome extensions that show you what your website will look with that. And there's like so much more stuff. Accessibility is like a huge topic, and there's so many tools. All right, so we're gonna like look at a website. I had something in mind and now I forgot. Does anyone have any websites that they want to look at that you think might be fun to see if they're accessible?
Zapier.com.
Do it.
Oh, sorry, I have a sickness lately, and I've been coughing a lot.
All right, what's this? So I have the Accessibility Insights for Web tool. This is, I think, from Microsoft. It gives you a few different options. Let's run the fast pass. This will run an automated check to see how accessible it is, with like a few really standard things to look through. And there are 70 problems. So there's a lot of issues with color contrast. So it says ensure the contrast between foreground and background colors meets WCAG to AA contrast ratio thresholds. Okay, so before we go crazy with that, I want to just show color standards. In case you've never seen this before, let's look at this. Here we go, W3. So this is like, I guess like kind of a spec about what is color contrast, but we can look at a different, that's like the W3C official page for that, but there's a lot of tools that will show you a contrast checker. So like you can search in, you can type in like your foreground color and your background, foreground meaning like text, and background, the background color, and see if your contrast ratio will pass the AA and AAA requirements. AA I think is less hardcore than AAA, but ideally you want every single page out there to pass AA, because this will help people with all sorts of vision. And it's not just like people who are completely blind, there's even just people who just have less than 20/20 vision. You know how picky we all are with like our color schemes and our code editors, right? So like be that picky with the color schemes on your websites. All right, so it's happier to not do that. And then label, ensure every form element has a label. This is important for people who are going through with a screen reader or tabbing through. This is like normal, the HTML stuff. But let's run through now. How do I go out of this? Let's run through an audit and then, or an assessment. Yeah, this will be like a guided thing that tells us what to do. So there's like a bunch of stuff here. We can do automated checks. Let's go through the keyboard stuff. So this will tell us, you know, what to do this. So it says like use tab and shift tab to navigate between widgets, and it'll like, I think it'll, oh, it isn't showing us. There's like a really fancy thing that sometimes comes up that like draws the lines, and I'm not sure why it's not coming up now.
I think there was a little toggle. If you turned it on, it would. I think it switches you back to the page. Yeah, right there.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. So now.
Yeah.
Oh, I might. Yeah. There we go. So it'll like show where it's going, and you can kind of see like eye vision from where someone who's only navigating using like tab and shift tab, which is the way that you navigate websites with a keyboard, where like their focus is going. And like you can see that by keeping the tab here and then going down here, the user skips all of this stuff, which might be important, might not be, but it's just going from action to action. And sometimes you'll find that as you're going through this, you'll like accidentally skip an action that you want a user to do. You'll skip a button or something because it's not done properly with HTML, and then you'll be like, oh, well, now I know I have to add this in my HTML and make it tabbable. And like most of this is done through HTML. ARIA tags are a little like in the order, I'd say, of fixing accessibility issues. First is HTML, second is ARIA, third is hacking it through JavaScript. which has happened to me before, but I don't recommend it. Let me go back to, and then I'll just run through like a few more things here. Just like give a, where'd it go? Yeah, just look through a few more of what Accessibility Insight says is important. So like headings, the function of a heading is to label a section of content. Headings should not be used as a convenient way to style other text. I think this is a really important point. Again, semantic HTML makes sure that a user who's going through without any styling understand what's going on. Oh yeah, and an example of that is the accessible links. When you only have links that are done by color, if a user, I wish I had the plugin, I don't on this computer, I have it on my work computer, but like, let's say for example, we wanna look at like this link here. If I could only see in monochrome, or if I had even had just like a really bad monitor that could only see in monochrome, if this didn't have a hover on underline, there's no way for me to see that this is a link. So if this was just changing color, there's no way for me to see like that this is a link. And there's a million little things like that. And like a guided thing like this will help you see that with just a ton of different options. But yes, all right, this is it for my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
One interesting thought I had about accessibility as I've worked with it more and more is that it's not just for people who need it. I think that accessibility should also be considered like ease of use. Like if you can tab through your form easily, that is accessibility. And it's important to have those kind of like quality of life features of your website. So I like to think of it also as just like the everyday person's requirement too.
Is this something y'all have encountered before? Like, are you familiar with accessibility as a concept, or how much of the specifics?
I have a little bit. At my last job, we also got kind of dinged for inaccessibility, and that was my other question was, I think it's Lighthouse is a common checker, but I haven't used it personally. I know Gatsby likes to use it, and then following, what's her name? Marcy Sutton does a lot of that as well.
Yeah, she's great, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised by the lack of
accessibility that was discussed in my boot camp, because I read like an HTML book, and so I was familiar with section, and I'm blanking on some of the other ones too, but like quote, address, like site, and they have all these very specific HTML tags, and we barely touched on any of those. So it's good that it's becoming more popular, because I personally like that. I like the structure of it. But yeah.
I had this same experience. The only reason why I learned about accessibility at my bootcamp is because I ended up doing a blog post about it because Beyonce got sued because her site was not accessible.
Yeah.
So I wrote about that, and then I like kind of learned what it was, but we didn't talk about it at all either. So this was very good.
Can you share that blog post? I really want to read it.
Yeah, I have to find it. I think I hit all my
Yeah.
bootcamp blog posts afterwards.
Yeah, just share it on Slack if you can find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had exactly the same experience. There was like hardly any mention of accessibility at all until I got into the internship with Leg Up, and then they were like, "Yeah, we've got to do this for accessibility, blah blah blah," and I would be like, "I don't know what you mean by that."
Mhm.
So yeah, this is super helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Nice job, Radhika.
It's a little rambly, but I have like a quarter's worth of work in it that I was trying to cut
Mhm.
down into 20 minutes, and it was very hard because I can tell you so many things and so many complicated things that we fixed with accessibility. But yeah, if anyone ever wants to talk about accessibility,
Mhm.
I now consider that one of my areas of expertise because of how much time we spent on just really complicated things on a consumer-facing website. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about too. Like even like it is good for developers to get familiar with screen readers and kind of like learn how to navigate a page and stuff. There's no substitute though for having someone who uses one every day actually look at your website, because they they have a much bigger sample size to choose from, or like kind of like draw from. So like the testers at Fable, like they're super good. Like there's a guy there, Sam, who we worked with on a couple things, and he's been using a screen reader for 20 years. And so he was able to tell us, like, if you just change this to a details element, like it would be totally accessible, like by default, and like he was able to actually kind of offer suggestions to fix things too, which we found super helpful. But yeah, there's so much, like you got to do the automated stuff. It's right there. And then it's better than nothing for you to at least kind of do, go through your pages on your own. Especially just making, like, the point that Sam actually made to us was just making sure you can navigate to everything with the keyboard. If like we had whole like widgets in the page that he just couldn't sort of quote unquote see because he couldn't get his keyboard to focus on the, it's like these complex interactive things. I mean, he's just like, I can't test that for you, sorry, because I can't get to it. So yeah, anyway, yeah, nice, good presentation. Hopefully everybody learned some things. Nice job. So Stacy's Zap, I think, like posted like the new pairings and started threads and everything. So that's pretty cool. Oh, hello. Who do we have there? Hi. So should we talk about kind of the coming week's work? I didn't see, like, who's paired up with whom?
It's me and Haley this week.
Okay.
With Rachel.
Nice. And what are the issues that are kind of on deck? Let's see. Is the board up to date, by the way? Looks like it might be.
Yeah, we should be on 12 and 13.
Mhm.
I want to view a list of shopping. I want to view a list of my shopping list items in order of how soon I'm likely to need to buy each of them again.
Mhm.
As a user, I want to view details of my purchases to better understand my purchase patterns.
Right. Okay. So that number 12 is a little bit dependent on getting the estimated next purchase dates kind of flowing through. So until you have that, you won't be able to sort by it, right? So I wonder if that affects sort of how we plan for the coming week. But Who wants to take which issue?
Matthew, you want to do 13? Might as well jump in.
Sure. I was just about to say
Okay.
12. I'm totally open to either. But yeah, that's fine.
I figure, well, let's see, because 12 seemed pretty close to what you're already doing. Well, I don't know.
Either way, I don't mind.
Okay.
We need 13.
I'm a little superstitious, so we'll see how this goes, but I don't like 13.
That took me a second.
Good to stretch yourself. Get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Cool. All right. And mentors want to kind of jump in with each. Oh, I still didn't. I got to remember to set breakout rooms as a feature on my Zoom account. So I guess somebody will have to kind of drop off and spin up a new call, and I might just.
I will. Radhika, do you want first dibs?
I don't mind either way. I'm still
Okay.
trying to figure out what the issues are doing. Who do you want to do a certain issue?
I was gonna jump on 13.
Okay. Cool. I can start a new one.
Okay, you're gonna start a new chat or
Yeah.
new Zoom. Okay.
Okay, cool. And Michael, I'll make you host of this one. Hand it off to you. Stop
Heyo.
recording, all that stuff. Wait, where's the recording button? Okay, there it is. All right.